everyone, it's Dr. Marco. Welcome to the health tip this week. And this week we're going to be focusing on your intestines and your brain. So I've talked about this connection a number of times, and I just want to hit a point of how we need to take care of this, or what kind of things can cause problems with this. I mentioned in the other video where we have our Restore product, which is very important for sealing the gut lining to make sure that it has good integrity and it's not loose and leaky and things getting into your blood. But I just want to talk about things that can disrupt this, because basically there's a very intimate connection between your gut and your brain and vice versa. So if one is disrupted, the other one can be disrupted. So your brain can actually be influenced by your gut. So it's important to know what kind of things can cause problems in your gut. So inside your intestines, as you know, there's a whole massive ecosystem of stuff. So the majority of it is big bacteria, millions and trillions of them, but there's also little viruses, they call them phages. There's also fungus, bacteria, there's parasites, certain worms and those kind of things. So there's a whole plethora of stuff. It's a whole biodome on the inside of us, sort of thing. But we're going to focus on when that's out of whack and it doesn't have the proper balance of bacteria, good ones, bad ones, opportunistic ones, etc. We call that situation, it's dysbiosis. So the biome on the inside, dys meaning it's disrupted, so you have a disrupted environment on the inside. So I'm just going to list off a number of things that can cause a lot of problems. So the one most obvious one is taking an antibiotic drug. Because antibiotic drugs kind of go in and kind of carpet bomb everything and cause a massive destruction of good, bad, opportunistic. But very often, a lot of the space is left open, and then opportunistic ones that should be at bay, if the regular bacteria are there, they're not there anymore. There's a lot more space, and then they start growing and overcrowding of things. So you have candida overgrowth and clostridium and difficile and all sorts of other bacteria that normally should be kind of calm. They start to kind of go out of whack and causes all sorts of problems. So antibiotics is the most obvious big one. Antifungal drugs also cause this as well. Some of the other categories of drugs that can cause it are analgesics or pain medication. That's a pretty big one. Another huge one is the birth control pill. So that can cause a lot of problems too. And you'll see how all this kind of fits together in sort of like the epidemic that's been happening for the last 20 or 30 years in our children, and what's going on with all the allergies and autism spectrum and all sorts of stuff there. Some other categories of drugs can be like heartburn pills, sleeping pills. They can also cause a lot of damage down there too and create this dysbiosis. Extreme levels of stress can cause it. Exorbitant amounts of starvation periods can cause it. So a lot of things can kind of push it that way. And obviously the other big things would be our modern diet, which is like highly processed foods, sugars, grains. Those are all the big things that can really cause a big dysbiosis. So kind of putting this all together, there's a really bright doctor named Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, who wrote a book called Gut and Psychology Syndrome. And there's a really great sort of summary thing that kind of, I call it, that describes the predicament of our species. So this is how she describes it, putting all these pieces together. For example, this is quite a common scenario which I see in my clinic. A grandmother has mild digestive problems as a result of low-key gut dysbiosis. She passes moderately abnormal gut flora to her daughter. Gut flora means flora just means the bacterial environment. So when a child is born vaginally, they pick up the flora that the mother had. So this grandmother had sort of mild disturbances, had the baby, which is the lady here in this situation. She had a daughter, and the daughter had a moderately abnormal gut flora in her situation. So on top of that, she decides not to breastfeed because it was not fashionable at the time. So breastfeeding is the most important meal a child will ever get, and they're actually finding that the breast milk in the first few days isn't made to feed the baby. It's made to feed the bacteria that the baby had picked up from mom on the way out of the vaginal canal. That's how important that is for our existence. So there's another thing. So mom decided not to breastfeed at that time. As a result, her daughter suffers from allergies, migraines, PMS, and digestive problems. Then she takes contraceptive pills from the age of 16, which deepens the damage to her gut flora, not to mention a few courses of antibiotics along the way for various infections and a diet of fast foods. After 10 years of being on the pill, she has children, to whom she passes her seriously abnormal gut flora. Her children develop digestive and immune problems, which then lead to eczema, asthma, autism, and other learning problems. And there you have the predicament of the species over the last 20 years. So let's start taking care of this now. We need to do this in a big way. So obviously we have the Restore product, which is really important. Fermented foods and other things like that can also be important to kind of reestablish this. And just try to get away from drugs and antibiotics and all that stuff unless it's absolutely necessary, and do whatever you can in a natural way to restore your health from the inside out. And obviously one of the big things that I work on is making sure that the brain is working good, because the brain has a big influence on the gut and the gut motility and the nerves coming out of the skull going into the intestines. So doing the chiropractic care and the network spinal analysis, making sure you're not stuck in what we call the sympathetic or the fight or flight all the time, which causes lack of blood flow to the intestines and can cause all this sort of stuff too. So you get the chiropractic care to optimize the brain and the nervous system. You do what you can to make sure you're not damaging this as much as you can. Put that two together and we can kind of change the course of how things are going. So if this video tip was helpful, please share it, and we will see you next time. Bye.